Jacob Blake. Say his name. Say his name. Say his name.
There are two systems of justice in the United States. There's a white system and there's a black system.
Welcome to this special edition of The Buff Show, where we're diving into the case of Jacob Blake up in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Lots of news on all sides that are just floating out there. Most of it's been fake, so we've been doing this week some research. I am Matt Buff, your host, and joining me is attorney Patrick Magaro from appealslawgroup.com. Thank you, Patrick, for joining me on the show.
Nice to see the audience. Good to see you, Matt.
Good to see you, too. Now, a lot of these things we're going to be talking about today are going to be on our website. We're not going to attach the videos to this video because YouTube will take it down. So what we did is create a page on thebuffshow.com. All right, so you go to thebuffshow.com/Jacob Blake. And I'll put the link here at the bottom here, but that's where you go to see the 911 dispatch calls, the court documents that we're going to talk about, and everything like that. So here's the thing, Patrick. If you pull a weapon on the cops, seriously resist arrest, and reach for a weapon in your car, you could be facing dire consequences. That's just a dice roll that you're willing to play if you're going to do something like that.
I would, if I was anybody's lawyer, I would counsel them against pulling weapons on police officers, yes.
Because it doesn't always work out well for you.
It almost always works out very badly for everybody.
It does, indeed. And we're seeing that. And then people are celebrating criminals more and more when they're finding out that they did resist and do all these stuff, but they jump to conclusions. And jump to conclusions is the theme of Black Lives Matter 2020.
Well, you know, I had $1 million idea once. It was called a jump to conclusions, Matt. It was
Was that
map
you?
with all these conclusions on it that you could jump to.
Wow. Sounds like a great idea, Office Space.
Yeah. Worst idea ever.
It was good for the movie, though. But what's not good is the movie being in real life where people are playing that jump to conclusions, Matt.
This is just another episode of the Netflix special 2020 in real time.
Yes.
That's all this is.
It's like their Black Mirror Bandersnatch, where you choose your own adventure. We kind of wish we could do that on some of these things.
Well, I wish we could go back.
It's insane. Now, you're heard the family and the attorney Benjamin Crump. Anytime there's an opportunity to make a racial situation national, Benjamin Crump is there, and he said that because one of the reporters asked him about this third-degree sexual abuse charge. And we have the copy of that for you. We're going to be going through that with you here. And we're going to tell you why it was relevant. But he said anything that he did in his past, which Jacob Blake had a very long rap sheet, all right? But they said anything he did in his past has nothing to do with what happened to him on that day. And that simply isn't true.
Well, it may be in the court of public opinion, but I can tell you in a court of law, everything you've done in the past will come back to haunt you again and again and again.
And here's why, and I want you to talk about this, because when the media first reported why Blake was at that house, let me get it pulled up over here, because it's very important to know that the third-degree sexual assault warrant address on the warrant itself, which we have a copy of, we'll put on the website. It's case number 2020 CF 000736, State of Wisconsin versus Jacob Blake. The address on that is the same address that the cops went to. And so the fake news story was that he was stopped his car to break up a fight between two girls. What actually happened was his ex-girlfriend calling 911 because he was in her house holding her keys and wouldn't give it to her. And he also had been stealing money out of her account. $500 withdrawals on each one, and he was threatening her over that. So she's the one who called the cops, and we have the dispatch call for you on thebuffshow.com/Jacob Blake. So what are your thoughts about that? Because when you have a warrant, it makes for a different situation.
It's not just the warrant that heightens officers' arousal in these types of cases. First, you have a situation where there's a 911 call for a domestic violence type situation in process. Those calls are generally given priority, and police are generally much quicker to respond to those. If the dispatch put over what they call in Wisconsin is a 99, that means there's an open warrant for the subject, which means an open arrest warrant for a felony is something that's also going to get the police they're a lot quicker because this is a free arrest. And they're technically required to respond and serve that arrest warrant when they're notified that there's a subject with an open arrest warrant.
Now, does that mean they also will bring backup with them? Does that make a difference in how many cops show up?
I'm not sure what the procedures are for the Kenosha Police Department, but generally speaking, when there is a felony arrest, most police departments around the country will require backup, especially in a domestic violence situation and especially in a situation where there's an active open felony warrant. So it would have been certainly within the realm of acceptable practices to have backup with you. It would be, I think, an anomaly if one single police officer were to show up and initiate contact with the subject in either one of those two scenarios by himself or herself.
Okay, good deal. The other thing we put on the website is the other camera angle that you didn't get to see. The camera angle were on the side of the car. It looks like at the back of the car the police have the subject subdued, but then all of a sudden they back away. And that's when one of the police officers yelled, "He has a knife." And then they start with guns on him, and that's when you see him walking around the front of the car. And then not getting in his car, he was reaching for something in the car. The police department in Kenosha has verified that a weapon was involved. The media has taken it for what they will, but several video enhancements show that he did have the knife in his hand, and it was shouted out in the group there. So we dispelled myth one that Jacob Blake was breaking up a fight between two girls. And now myth two, police walked up to Blake and shot him in the back. Based on the information we have, the other camera angle, that clearly didn't happen. Now, I thought at the back of the car, on the other side of the car, the passenger side, they should have had him subdued. Did you see anything? Is it when a suspect has a weapon, do the cops automatically back off, especially if it's not a gun? Or how does it work?
That would be also extremely unlikely. In any event, it's also unlikely that once they start to subdue a subject and take him or her down to the ground and exercise control over them, that they would disengage the way that it appears from the video that these two officers did. So it looks like they disengaged for whatever reason. There's some news reports that a taser was deployed and did not function properly. I don't know how true that is or isn't, but what I do see... We
couldn't verify the taser.
You can't. You really can't see it from the video, but what you do see is two officers disengaging from the subject and allowing him to get up and walk around. I think the whole thing is extraordinarily poor police work.
Yes, indeed, because if you notice, while they're walking, they still have guns drawn on him, and they're telling him to stop, but he's not listening. So the subduing of the subject should have been completed at the other side of the car, but they're saying if he brandishes that knife, and that's because they all jump back at once. It was a little curved knife. It was one of those that you hook on. You know what I'm saying?
Like a hunting knife?
Yeah, kind of like a hunting knife, and it's short blade. I think you can still subdue the subject at that point, even though he's wielding that object.
At that point, if he has a knife and he's displaying it in a threatening manner, there's no point in just giving repeated commands. I understand then if he has a knife and you're on the ground and you see the knife in his hand, disengaging and getting up, giving him a command to drop the knife at gunpoint would be reasonable. Allowing him to continue to walk and just ignore that while you back away or follow him like these two police officers did, that is unreasonable. I don't understand why they would allow him to do that. I'm from New York, and say what you want about the NYPD, but if this was a case in New York, this man would have never gotten up off the ground to begin with. He would have been given a command, and the moment that he started resisting, he would have been down to the ground and controlled. Hopefully, you would hope in a safe manner that would prevent injury to anybody, but it would have never progressed to this point. And I don't understand why the officers would allow him to get up and start moving around like that.
That's very interesting because when you talk about New York, you're talking about millions of people. You go to Kenosha, Wisconsin, and there's 100,000 people, small town feel, kind of like a Midwestern town feel, like Kansas City. Big little city is what they call it. There's a chance with this Blake having such a long arrest record and domestic abuse record, there's a chance these cops probably already knew him.
It's possible. I mean, it's a small town. What it appears they did know from the computer-aided dispatch is that the police officers, when they responded to this initial 911 call, they were advised either before they started going to the scene or at least when they were en route to the scene, that the subject also had an open felony warrant. Whether they knew what it was for, it doesn't matter. A felony warrant is a felony warrant. But they may have known him. They may have known him from the street. It's possible.
Well, let's talk about that warrant, because the way the subject acted, this warrant, I looked it up, carries 8 to 11 years in prison for what he did, and that's what he was facing. And like you said, it was an open warrant. That was when you listen to the dispatch on the website, you can hear them say a 9-9, like Patrick said, and that means there's an open felony. So this, the warrant was filed for Blake's arrest on July 7th. And if you look down there under Myth 2, that's where all this is. And then we're going to put all this on the site for you too. But it was criminal trespass to a dwelling with a modifier of domestic abuse, third-degree sexual assault with a modifier of domestic abuse, and disorderly conduct with a modifier of domestic abuse. There was a lot of things happening here. And this is the criminal affidavit on May 3rd, 2020, Blake's ex-girlfriend. Now, we're dispelling another myth here, the myth that he sexually assaulted an underage girl, a girl that was 14 or 15.
It makes you wonder where these news reports come from.
That's not true, guys. According to this, if you're talking about this, this arrest warrant and this affidavit, this is from his ex-girlfriend, and she's clearly old enough because she's the mother of his kids.
She's clearly a grown woman, yes.
Yes, she's a grown woman. So there's another myth dispelled there, too. But he broke in the house and stole the key to her vehicle, and her debit card before fleeing the scene. Blake's ex-girlfriend, identified as LNB in the affidavit, said she had attended a party in Milwaukee. She had rented a vehicle because she was not sure her car was mechanically capable of making the trip. LBN's sister, Tamra, watched her 3 children while she was gone. She returned home around 4 a.m. After returning home, LNB took her son to the bedroom and laid down to go to sleep. LNB said she woke up around 6 a.m. to see Blake standing over her. Now, this gets a little graphic, so if there's kids, chill. As LNB laid on her back on the bed, Blake said, "I want my blank. I want my shit," is what he said. Yeah.
I don't think he was referring to poop, but...
No, he wasn't. I think he was basically robbing her at this point. As LNB laid on her back, Blake suddenly and without warning reached his hand between her legs, penetrated her vagina with a finger and pulled it out, smelled it and said, "Smells like you've been with other men." Officer Raichi reported that LNB had a very difficult time telling him this and cried as she told how the defendant assaulted her, and then the defendant immediately left the bedroom. LNB told the officer Blake penetrating her digitally caused her pain and humiliation and was done without her consent. After Blake penetrated LNB, she managed to collect herself and ran the defendant out the front door, and then realized her vehicle was missing because he took the keys and then he took the car. LNB then noticed her truck key and her Great Lakes debit cards were missing. While waiting for officers to arrive, LNB checked her bank account and noticed 2 fraudulent ATM withdrawals made on May 3rd, 2020. Both withdrawals were for $500 at the known time. So that is the highlights, I guess, of the actual affidavit. And you and I were talking on the phone. When you have this much testimony, what does that mean for the warrant? Does it make it easier to get that warrant? Third-degree felony. Talk about what a third-degree sexual assault is.
I'm not an expert on Wisconsin law, but a third-degree felony is what they call a class, or third-degree sexual assault is what they call a Class G felony in Wisconsin. I did consult with a friend of mine who is a Wisconsin lawyer who lives here in Florida now, wisely. He actually used to live in Kenosha. Surprise, surprise. But it's punishable by, he tells me, up to 5 years in prison and 5 years of probation. But that's to say nothing of the other charges in the felony warrant as well. But essentially, when you have a warrant has to be issued on probable cause, and probable cause in this situation comes from the girlfriend. A private citizen is presumed to be telling the truth when they make a report to police, and I don't know what the procedures are, but it's likely that she may have given a sworn statement to the police the night of the incident, the night she reported it, and based on her statement to the police, they went and sought and received a judge's approval for an arrest warrant, and that judge, in issuing the warrant, necessarily made a finding that probable cause to believe a crime had been committed by this man, and that's why the arrest warrant had been issued. And it was open for several weeks, it looks like.
Yes, the filing date was July 6, 2020 for the warrant. And so this is case number, DA case number 2020KN002047, buffshow.com/Jacob Blake. We'll have that link on there for you as well. But there's several counts here with modifiers. What does it mean when it has a modifier attached to it?
Usually in this situation, it'll mean that this is a crime involving domestic violence. And again, I'm not an expert on Wisconsin law, but certain crimes are, for example, if I see you in a bar,
right,
and you're a stranger and we get into a fight and I punch you in the face, that's in Florida, that's just a regular battery. But if you and I are romantic partners, and we're not, don't worry, he's not my type. But if we're romantic partners and we're living at home together or we're just involved together, and I punch you, now it's a battery involving domestic violence, which carries with it some additional consequences.
Yes, indeed, because like count 1 is criminal trespass to dwelling. That's a misdemeanor A, but it has a modifier of domestic abuse. A perfect example of what you just said. What really got him in trouble is the felony G, third-degree sexual assault. That was a modifier of the domestic abuse charge. So that's the felony G. So you had 2 misdemeanors and felony G. Now, why are we diving into this so much? Because it's at the same house that the cops show up and find him out, and he's harassing this woman again because he won't give her keys to the house. That's what they said on the dispatch. So we can pretty much verify that's the way it was.
And the reason why it's a domestic violence modifier is simply because they have children in common. That fact
that's
alone,
a great point.
Right? They didn't live together. I don't think he
No.
lived at this address. But when you have children in common with someone else and you commit some violent offense against them, it's going to be classified as a crime involving domestic violence, which carries with it a whole bunch of other consequences. So, for example, first, you can't possess a gun. It's a federal crime to possess a gun if you've been convicted of any crime, misdemeanor or felony, involving domestic violence. There's findings that a restraining order should be issued, and certainly if there's any domestic violence, that will have some sort of impact on any determination involving child support, child custody, visitation, things of that nature.
And so that made this situation 10 times worse because he's at the scene of the first crime. And here comes the police again. And God knows what was going on in that house. We don't have to speculate on that. But when he came outside, that's when the trouble really started. Some people, we've told you a lot of facts, but there's some hypotheticals. Some people will challenge the police in this day and age now because if you make it out of it, you're going to be some sort of celebrity. Some people will challenge the police because the last thing they want to do is go to prison for 12 years. Being as a sexual predator. That's just
right.
Not. There's a reason that for some reason the suspect was not listening to the police officers. Now let's get to the shooting itself. They kept guns on him all the way around the car. But then when he opens the car door, he reaches down. Do you think that's what got him shot when he reached down like that?
That in combination with other factors, it should never have been allowed to progress to that point.
No.
And I keep saying that over and over, but that's the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation, like I said, is any action that a suspect is going to take, what they call a furtive action or a sudden action, reaching into their pocket, reaching into a closed compartment, reaching into a waistband, reaching behind their back, these are all extremely ill-advised when police officers are pointing their gun at you because you are likely to draw a reaction like this.
Yes.
Now, whether you think it's right, wrong, or indifferent, the best thing to do in that situation is to keep your hands visible and follow commands if you don't want to get shot. Now, again, you're talking to a libertarian type here. The wisdom of whether the police should be allowed to do that in the first instance is a whole nother topic, but I'm just talking in terms of reality. I don't want to get shot, therefore when I get pulled over, especially at night, I keep my hands on the steering wheel. If I need to reach into my back pocket, I look at the officer and I say, I'm going to reach into my back pocket to get my wallet. I don't want you to get worried because I don't want to get shot. I want to leave with the same number of holes in my body that I came with.
Yes. You want to keep calm, be compliant. You know, we talk about mask mandates and all the time, and everybody's like, just be compliant, but they're not being compliant to police officers. Just be compliant. It's a small situation. Both Patrick and I agree this thing should have been solved on the passenger side of the car. Not sure how he got out of that. You can analyze the video for yourself, but it was a sudden movement by all the police officers at once.
And the reality of the situation is, for all the viewers out there, you know, I'm not expressing any opinion on who's right, who's wrong here.
No.
What I'm trying to do is just simply gather the facts, and that's what is almost impossible in these kinds of situations, because you have all of this misinformation that's put out, like, you know, he was breaking up a fight between two women, and they just walked up and shot him right in the back immediately, and, you know, that's not what happened. Whether he was right or wrong, the officer in shooting him, or whether Mr. Blake was right or wrong, that's to be determined in a court of law. But what I can't stand is the court of public opinion rendering its verdict before all the facts are in and based on faulty information. And that's what I want our viewers is to think for yourselves and get the facts, the cold, hard facts. Just the facts, ma'am.
Yeah,
Facts.
that's right. Just like L.A. Confidential. Just the facts, Jack. Just the
Dragnet.
facts.
Dragnet, too.
And Dragnet, yes. But that's why I wanted to do this show, but I wanted to do it today after we gathered some evidence. We can't speak to the emotion of the issue, but I can tell you how important this affidavit was from the girlfriend, and he was at the same house that the police showed up to. That was the same house as the suspect did whatever he did, according to her affidavit. And they had enough to issue the warrant, and that the police knew that the warrant was on him heading out there. His after the first scuffle, he blatantly disregarded the police, pointing their gun at him, and kept walking. There's no disputing that. The sudden move into the car was unfortunate that he did all this with his kids in the car, but the kids were actually in the car, in the back seat when he did this. Very unfortunate, but some people just don't think in this situation. But the kids definitely were in the car.
And that's the most unfortunate thing is, you know, the kids are the collateral damage here because they had nothing to do with nothing.
That's right. They're just kids.
They're just kids, and they were with their dad, and, you know, whether their dad was a good person, a bad person, he's still their dad. And that is the real unfortunate thing here, is that it happened in front of his children. They're going to be scarred for life. And like I said, this all boils down to no good ever comes out of these situations. None, right? And the question is, how do we prevent these things from happening? Better training, better understanding, people trying to play it smarter. Everybody bears some responsibility in trying to avoid these situations, some more than others. Who bears the most responsibility here? We're not going to know that. And the actions of that man going into the car is going to be dissected frame by frame by frame, and there's going to be disagreements on both sides, and who knows where this is going to turn out.
Well, the police did verify a weapon, but when asked about the gun, they said no comment. They didn't want to talk about that. I thought that was interesting, but they did verify the knife. So
that's not a knife. That's a knife.
That's right. So what we look at here is a situation, and all these situations are very high stress. And we're talking about human beings here. So before we jump to conclusions, that's what Fox News did. Fox News said the police went up and shot him, and that he was breaking up a fight between two girls, and then the whole thing blew up. NBA players, that's not a sport, the NBA anymore. It's more of a political affiliation of the Democratic Party. And somebody said the WNBA is boycotting too. I'm like, I didn't even know the WNBA was still in existence.
I'm going to bite my tongue on that one.
But, you know, I don't care. But now we go to the end of this where he's paralyzed, so no more sexual assault. And
no more sex, period.
No more sex, period. And and of course that too is not completely verified. That's just family members saying that. But if he is paralyzed, that means he's still alive and he's able to serve this warrant. So basically, legally, the moment he heals and is released from the hospital, he should be off to prison. Is that correct?
That is another cruel reality, is that you can't just ignore a warrant. Now, maybe in Wisconsin, the local prosecuting authority can withdraw or make an application that the warrant be withdrawn. But the reality situation is, once he's released from the hospital, if that warrant is not recalled, he will be subject to arrest and bail proceedings and the whole 9 yards. Although that may not happen for a long time, because I have a feeling that the injuries are probably extensive enough to keep him in the hospital for a long time. So, nevertheless, in New York City, we used to have a procedure called hospital arraignments, where even if a subject was injured and not able to leave the hospital, they would still do an arraignment. They would bring the judge, the court reporter, the defense lawyer, and the prosecutor next to the hospital bed.
Wow.
And do the arraignment right there. Yes, I've done them before. So if Wisconsin has that, that is also a possibility that they could do that next to his hospital bed. But the person has to be somewhat coherent, and given the extent of the injuries, he's probably going to be heavily medicated, sedated, whatever. So he probably won't be in a state of mind that he can participate in such a proceeding, at least not anytime soon. That's my guess.
Well,
and I'm not a doctor, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a whole nother subject. But his father came out yesterday and said he just had one question: why'd you shoot me so many times? I think he expected to probably get shot for what he did, but his question was, why did they shoot him so many times? And I think that's the issue they're going to make it. Why'd you shoot him 7 times? What would you say to that? Why 7 times? Is the police, are they trained to seriously impale the subject if they feel threatened?
Well, this goes back to my military training. I know you were in the military too. You don't take just one shot when you're, we are in the military. You are trained to continue firing until the target is neutralized.
That's right.
And from what I saw in the video, he was shot multiple times but did not go down right away.
Yes.
Whether or not that is excessive force, again, that's a determination for a court to make. But and I haven't been trained as a police officer, so I don't know, but if it's anything like the military, you're going to shoot until the target is neutralized, the target is down. It could be the training, it could have been nerves, it could have been a number of different things. It could have even been a malfunction with the weapon. We don't know.
There's all kinds of possibilities.
We don't have all the facts yet.
One thing you do see, when the subject goes down, the shooting stops and they immediately start resuscitation. That's in the video.
And that would be standard police procedure.
And administrative leave after you had to use your weapon is also standard police procedure.
Anytime a police officer is involved in a shooting, as far as I know, everywhere in the country, there's administrative leave. That officer is taken off the street and either sent home with pay, sent home without pay, assigned to desk duty, something. They're immediately segregated.
Well, Patrick, I really appreciate you joining me because we just wanted to weed through the bullshit and get straight to the facts. So I appreciate that. Now you know more. Visit www.thebuffshow.com/Jacob Blake. All this information that we're talking about is on there for you. Like we said, we didn't want to connect the videos to this show because then YouTube would take it down. So there you have it. Now you know a little bit more, but before you jump to conclusions, remember, this isn't the movie Office Space. Just the facts. Read the facts. We'll see you next time. Stay smart out there.